I'm going to go over today our road towards climate smart communities and the actions that we worked on and are continuing to work on. And I'm happy to take any questions. We could do it at the end or during as we go. And I'm certainly happy to speak with folks afterwards to, beyond reach out. I could talk about this ad nauseum. So this is what I love to do. Oh, Vanessa's just joining in now, looks like. Vanessa, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I'm on my phone and my computer's just acting up all of a sudden. So I'll just be here on my phone. Paige, if you want to lead from the local champions end, is that okay?
Sure, of course. Did you have a special introduction for Julie that you wanted to do, or should we just let her go right ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to tell the group, I don't have my notes in front of me, but gosh, I was just going to say that as Paige and I were researching and developing local champions, Julie's name came up over and over again, and it became really clear that people respect her work and look to her as one of the leaders in the Hudson Valley. And we thought she'd be an excellent person to have come and speak because she works, in and through government, which is one of the main themes of local champions. And so we invited her to come and kind of share her story and illustrate with her real life experience some of the things we've been talking about. And so Julie's going to present, and then I'm hoping we can have, pepper her with a lot of questions and just get to know like how she did it and what her particular experiences have been. So I would just want to say a huge thank you to Julie for making time for us.
Thank you, Julie.
Great. Thank you for that. So this is where the city of Kingston is. Can everyone just tell me where you're from so I can get an idea of where everyone is from? Kristen, you're from Hurley.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to see you.
Thanks.
Kathy?
Northeast in Millerton.
Okay. Dan?
Copeg.
Copeg. Madeline?
Rochester.
Rochester, okay. Christina?
Germantown.
Germantown, okay. And Jennifer?
Unionville in Dutchess County.
Okay, awesome. So we're in Ulster County on the Hudson River in the Hudson Valley, surrounded by water on all sides, although that's not really evident here. And, this is an area historically that was settled by Native Americans. Years ago, we're part of the Lenape tribe here in the Kingston, Ulster County area. And we were the northern reaches of the Lenape area, which included Pennsylvania and New Jersey, New York City. Ultimately, European settlers moved in, offered a land treaty, here, we'll offer you this. That was something that was unbeknownst to the Lenape tribe at the time. They were used to not really possessing land. It wasn't something that was even part of their normal day to day. They were not nomadic people. They farmed the land. And ultimately, Kingston was built up with a stockade area that kind of sheltered the Europeans in place and created conflict. And from there, ultimately the Lenape people were forced out, and now they mostly live in Oklahoma and Canada. And so we are now, that was what our community was built on. But now we are a very mixed area with people from all over, New York State. We have very much an old Kingston and a new Kingston. So I'm working with two different conversations at all times with folks who have been here for a long time, and then folks who are moving in and demanding different things of the government. We have come a long way in our environmental efforts. I've worked for the city since 1999. I have been embedded in the Parks and Recreation Department, and I started off, and my background is in environmental education. And I started in 99, but it took about 8 years to convince the city to hire myself as an environmental educator full-time. It just wasn't something that municipalities were doing. Hiring people in the environmental field just wasn't a thing but then we were able to convince them to hire me and my husband the next year. We started a Conservation Advisory Council. So the two commissions that we have, and these are relevant to Climate Smart in that one of them is policy related and one of them is programmatic. So every municipality in the state is able to have, by New York State General Municipal Law, a Conservation Advisory Council. And that council, of which our county, Ulster County, has 16 of them, but they're sporadic throughout the state. Ours works on policy. So we advance environmental policy, we do environmental development reviews, and that is the group that was responsible for our natural resources inventory and ultimately our open space plan. Separately from that, we formed that Conservation Advisory Council, and from there, we wrote our first climate action plan back in 2012. We used 2010 greenhouse gas emissions data. We hired a climate analyst for 1 year to do that. And that was very mitigation focused. So it was very much, there was a government operations section and a community section, but it was very much about, low hanging fruit and mitigation. Separately, we went through a separate process to look at adaptation, particularly on our waterfront, because we are surrounded by not surrounded, but we have a lot of tidal waters. So we did a sea level rise task force and plan that we put together back in 2013. Subsequent to that, the Climate Smart Community Program was getting launched in 2014 as a pilot, and the state reached out to the city of Kingston and 6 other municipalities or 10 other municipalities to say, hey, do you want to be part of this? We think you could be, successful in the pilot. At the time, the highest level was bronze that was available, and through the pilot, we achieved bronze, which was the highest scoring level. Subsequent to that, the Clean Energy Communities designation came out. We became the first clean energy community. Now we're applying for that leadership round again. And ultimately, the Climate Smart Communities program then morphed to have a silver option, which was 1 level higher, and we became the first city to be a silver certified Climate Smart community. And we become recertified as well, because there's a 5-year gap where if you get certified, you have to then recertify after 5 years. We are now working on our 2030 climate action plan because our original climate action plan set goals for 2030. Our original climate action plan set goals for 2020. We're past 2020, so now we have set goals for 2030, and we are putting that together now, and that should be complete by the end of this year. So what does all of this encompass? Oh, I forgot to mention, my other committee is the Climate Smart Kingston Commission. Okay, so we thought all of that could happen, all of the work of all of our climate work could happen under one Conservation Advisory Council. But what we realized was that there was too much. Now we're a city of 23,000 people, and people are really, really dedicated here. However, doing all the policy work and the environmental reviews and the natural resources inventory and all that is too much to also enact our climate action plan. So we formed a separate Climate Smart Communities, what we called a Climate Smart Kingston. And in order to get your certification, you need to have that sort of task force. That Climate Smart Kingston Commission, their sole purpose is to make sure our climate action plan happens. They do that in supporting me. We are unique in that I am a city staff person that is paid, and all of the rest of the commission is volunteer. Same thing with Conservation Advisory Council. But they basically support me and my office to advance our climate action plan. And this is some of the work that we've done. So we broke our climate action plan and our climate smart work into 6 major areas. Energy, and I'm gonna go through all these, transportation, land use, sustainable resource management, adaptation and resilience, and outreach and education. So let me start with outreach and education. Transparency and communication is really important to our administration and to this process. I will say in the beginning, it was really hard, and it was the thing we focused on the least. We just wanted to get the work done, and communicating it to the public and all that just wasn't on our radar. We didn't have the capacity to do it. We didn't find it as important. Now more and more it's being demanded of us. So we're doing it more and more, but it's also, we feel it's important for transparency. We do every day of the year environmental education in the schools. So although now I'm not the environmental educator anymore, I'm now the sustainability coordinator, I have environmental ed staff that go into the schools. We hosted a conference, a statewide conference on the environment. We do an annual Earth Fair and Expo. our local, Earth Fair to bring everyone out. But we also have convened communities on our waterfront because we're not the only community on the Hudson that's experiencing flooding, and certainly not the only one that will experience and is experiencing sea level rise. So all of those efforts help to folks to understand what we're doing, but kind of convene different communities across the state. We've done a lot on energy. Like I said, we are a designated clean energy community, and each of these things we have done. And I will say almost all of what we have done has been grant funded. My salary is, and has been since I started here in '99, has been almost 100% grant funded. I am paid out of the general fund, but I seek funding, I execute the funding, and my salary gets reimbursed. And so does multiple other staff that I have. We've moved towards an alternative fuel fleet. We did that with DEC funding, Department of Environmental Conservation, zero emissions vehicle funding. So we've shifted every sedan that we have. We have 161 vehicles in our city, but only some of them we can actually change to EVs because our packers, our trash packers, that doesn't exist yet, are not readily available. Our fire trucks, we can't shift over. Even our pursuit vehicles, we've only been able to recently start to shift. So we were able to transfer all of our sedans over to EV. And we also installed EV charging stations around the city, again, using DEC funding. There's also NYSERDA funding that helps to fund electric vehicle charging stations. We benchmark our buildings, which basically means we use a free tool, EPA's Portfolio Manager, to track the energy use in all of our buildings. And in doing so, that helped us achieve our clean energy communities standing, and also lets us understand which buildings are using the most energy and how we can change that. We do that for every building over 1,000 square feet, municipal buildings. We have set up an Energized New York finance program so that commercial entities can have loan options for renewable energy and for energy efficiency measures. We did a Solarize campaign for a short period of time to really jazz up solar on people's homes. We tried to streamline the process through a unified solar permit, which we have adopted for the city. Within the last 2 years, I've converted all of my municipal buildings and all of our city streetlights, both decorative and overhead, to LED. We did that working with New York Power Authority. Because we were a clean energy community, we received funding and we were able to retrofit all of our city hall windows to storm windows. It's a historic building, so we couldn't change what it looked like from the outside, so we had to install interior windows. We've done clean heating and cooling, so upgraded our HVAC systems in multiple buildings to ground source heat pumps. And we are currently right now going through the process to adopt the New York Stretch Energy Code, which is a more advanced energy code that brings the level of energy efficiency to a higher level for all of our developments. For land use, we have a lot of plans. I always say we're a city of plans. We did our natural resources inventory. That was with the help of the Conservation Advisory Council. We worked with SUNY New Paltz interns to gather the data. I hired a natural resource inventory consultant and open space consultant, both with Hudson River Estuary Program grant funding. They just launched it. So if you're looking to do your natural resources inventory or open space plan or community preservation plan or natural resource, open space index or any of those things, the Hudson River Estuary Program just 2 days ago launched a $750,000 grant program called the Local Stewardship Program, Planning Program. And we've gotten that 2 years in a row. Many communities have gotten that. It's not super competitive, but it's really great way to fund those plans. So we moved through those processes we just adopted our open space plan last year, which gives us guidance and gives our community guidance on how what to do with our community or our land. We are 2 years into an organics diversion plan. So the city of Kingston, we have our own Department of Public Works that manages all of our solid waste. We're dual stream and trash, but I wanted to understand what it would look like to do curbside composting. So I hired a consultant with Department of Environmental Conservation organics funding, and they did a 2-year analysis of what it would look like to do citywide composting. So we've analyzed all of our trash, all of our, whatever we collect. We done surveys, everything we could possibly do to understand the process, but also looking at composting at municipal meetings, in municipal buildings, at events in the city of Kingston, and then what a compost bin distribution plan would look like. So all of that is being put together into a feasibility analysis that will be done this spring, and then we'll figure out what to do from there. We've also looked a lot at our urban ag. So, you know, we are a municipality that's pretty urban, but so we don't have large tracts of agricultural space anymore, although this land was ag land before. We don't have that space anymore because it's built out. But what we do have are pocket park areas or areas where urban ag, like community gardens and Victor gardens and backyard gardens, can happen. So we've done some zoning, we're evaluating zoning based on that, also based on raising chickens and bees and you know, livestock and other things in the city. So we've evaluated that. And on our waterfront, we've done a Rondout Creek watershed management plan, because that's one of the water bodies that abuts the city, to understand how, even though we're at the base of the Rondout Creek, basically the bottom of the watershed, how what we are doing as a city impacts the rest of the watershed. We've also done an incredible amount of work on transportation. So we have a Complete Streets Advisory Council. Not only are we a city of plans, we're also a city of committees. We have a Complete Streets Advisory Council that works on evaluating our street system and our transportation system and making those streets as complete as possible. Complete being accessible to all forms of transportation safely, including pedestrians and bicycles. So we have a green line system that is in collaboration with the Kingston Land Trust. We work very closely with the Kingston Land Trust and have developed a green line system, which is a system of on and off-road bike and pedestrian trails through the city. We have an effort called Safe Routes to Schools, which is looking at sidewalks and access to schools. We do a lot of walking school buses in our city, where, like for instance, in Midtown here in Kingston at George Washington School, the principal comes out every day and she walks down the longest road that has the most kids on it. And by the time she gets to the end, they all follow her back and they all walk back together. And that's a walking school bus too. But the sidewalks have to be safe in order for them to do that. But what we have found is that this is sort of happening very disjointly. That it's like, oh, let's put a bike lane in here. Let's look over here. So right now we are doing a bicycle pedestrian master plan to understand the conditions of our sidewalks, to understand the conditions of our crosswalks, and where do we need ADA ramps, and where is everything else, so that it will tie together, so that when funding does become available, we're not sporadically looking around. We actually have a strategy to make the whole city more pedestrian and bike friendly. And the city fleet and the charging stations link in with the transportation as well. With our sustainable resource management, I mentioned before, we shifted. It's been a little bit of a rigmarole with recycling. I'm also the recycling coordinator. But we were single stream recycling for a long time, and we last year, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, we shifted back to dual stream recycling. So that was a whole effort to have people sort out their commingled versus their paper and cardboard. It's been successful thus far, but again, we're trying to shift also towards the diversion of food waste. So we have the diversion study. But something else we're looking at, being a city, is what we do in order to manage our stormwater. And we discharge our stormwater into the Rondout Creek, which goes into the Hudson River. Our wastewater treatment plant is right on the Rondout Creek. And we have incredibly aging infrastructure. So Kingston's been around since, you know, a couple hundred years, several hundred years. And so we have lately, with grant funding, been shifting towards green infrastructure management of our stormwater. So if you've been in Kingston anytime in the last couple of years, or if you continue to come here in the next couple of years, you'll see all of Broadway, which is our major corridor down the city, is being redone. And we are putting in 70 tree pit and bioswales to capture all the stormwater from Broadway. When we do small parking lot projects, like the bottom picture that you see here, we put in bioswales, we put in dry wells, we put in permeable pavers or porous pavement. And we've created, we're almost completed, I've almost completed with a team, a green infrastructure management plan, so that when new parking lots or road developments or any kind of development is put in, or a park remodel, how do we do so and manage the stormwater on site so that we're reducing our combined sewer overflows into the creek, so that we're managing that stormwater on site, and also that we're increasing our our use of green infrastructure versus gray, and the co-benefits of that. And we are a tree commission. We are a Tree City USA. So we have a tree commission that actively is involved in all that process. I mentioned that we are always grappling with water. These are some pictures of flooding that we've seen on our waterfront from hurricanes Sandy and Irene. And this is something that we will always contend with until we do something about it. And those options are either accommodate the water, fortify against it, or retreat. And so retreating isn't really something we want to do. Our community built up on the river, the extraction industry in the river and by the river, ice harvesting and all these other things are the draw. We have people coming to our city from the water. We're connected to the water. But our biggest risks, our wastewater treatment plant is on the water. Our cultural institutions are on the water. Our restaurants are on the water, and people live on the water. So there's this dynamic that we're not alone in of how do we deal with this, and how do we maintain that connection and that sense of place and that quality of life while also understanding the risks. So we've been working on that with lots of communities. We've worked closely with Cornell Adaptive Design Studio, and we've done waterfront designs for all of our properties along the waterfront, to understand what we would need to do in order to, not have to retreat, to be able to stay there, to be able to develop successfully and adapt. And now it comes down to money. Where do we get the money to, like at Kingston Point Beach? It's one of only 4 official swimming beaches on the Hudson River. We just came up with the plan over the last year. It's going to cost me about $2.5 million to retrofit my beach to be able to live 100 more years. Where am I going to get $2.5 million in the middle of COVID? Probably nowhere to invest in a beach, but we have a plan, and once funding becomes available, we'll move it forward. So we have a lot of waterfront initiatives. This is me in my Explorer Halloween costume. This was after whatever storm it was at Halloween. I can't remember if it was Sandy or Irene, but I was pointing, this is at our waterfront. That's my kayak building filled with kayaks, and that's the level of the water down on our beach. And here's our wastewater treatment plant. So we've done an incredible amount of work to really look at how we can stay connected to the river without losing our assets. And also continue to have access. So we're not unlike any other community where we have brownfield sites right on the water, where we have previous industrial sites on the water. And how do we work with the developer or work with Central Hudson or the utility, whatever it is, to clean up assess the areas, to clean up those areas, and to make them accessible both by land and by water. And so there's been some major efforts along both our Rondout and Hudson River waterfronts. Hutton Brickyards, huge development that's come in to bring people to the Hudson River waterfront. Scenic Hudson just purchased, and it's going to be our next New York State Park, the Quarry Waters or Hudson Cliffs State Park, a huge portion of Kingston's waterfront that was previously industrial. And so really understanding how we can increase that access has been very important to us, and that's part of our open space plan. And all the while doing this, understanding that we have an incredible amount of brownfields in our community, because especially along the waterfront, it was all industrial. So it was, brick making and cement making and hauling and shipping and all these other different things. And now it's not industrial anymore. And so how do we recover from that? And so we've gotten funding through FEMA, through New York State, DOT, through many different funders to identify our brownfield opportunity areas, to understand what a mitigation looks like, and to figure out how to develop them moving forward. And then I sleep. And that's the end of the day. And that's what I do. And I wake up the next day and I do it again.
Thank you so much, Julie. This is fantastic. It's incredible to see what you're up to in detail. Thank you for sharing.